Good morning and welcome to Mystery, Murder, and Magic. It's another week and we're getting closer to Thanksgiving. Now, I don't know about y'all, but I've been thinking about that good food since at least July. Now, I know I can cook that exact same meal any day of the week. And feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but it just seems like the turkey dressing, pineapple casserole, broccoli casserole, cranberry sauce, and pumpkin pie just tastes better when you're gathered around the table with your family who are bound to start arguing at any moment. I'm not wrong, am I? Now, I do love to cook, and sometimes it wears me out cooking those big meals, but it's so worth it. Now, the other night, I was cooking a good old chuck roast in the crock pot with cream and mushroom soup, and if anybody can have an accident with a crock pot, that would be me. I was trying to see if the roast was getting tender, and a big chunk of it slid off the fork, and it sloshed the soup back up on my thumb and first two fingers, and it hurt like the devil. I have to tell you, it hurt. I hollered, okay? But it's starting to heal up now. Now, when that happened, it got me thinking about some magical mountain medicine. When I was younger, my aunt's mom, and I say aunt's mom because the mom wasn't kin to me because she was an aunt by marriage. But anyway, she had the gift of talking the fire out of a burn. Now, when I burned my fingers the other night, I was wishing I could talk to her and get some of that relief. Well, the fire talking and some other mountain medicine are what we're going to be talking about on today's episode. It's Monday, and that means it's time for a new episode of Mystery, Murder, and Magic. And here's your host, Andrea Lee, and sometimes Alex. How'd you like that new intro? It's kind of perky, gets you going, huh? Pretty good to put some energy in you, running through your veins on a Monday morning. But anyway, so if you've never heard of talking the fire out of a burn, I know you're thinking I'm probably crazy. And you're right, I am crazy, but I swear it's a real thing that really works. Now, the last time I remember Miss Seymour talking a fire out of a burn for me was when I was a teenager, and she did it over the phone. And I can remember she said like a certain Bible verse and told me that I had to believe that it would work or it wouldn't work. Well, I believed, and the burning pain was gone in no time, and the blisters healed up very quickly. Then when I was an adult, I'm going to say probably in my late 20s, I had to take some medicine, and it made me very sensitive to the sun. So, while I was taking it, I avoided the sun as much as possible. But one of those weekends that I was on the medicine, my daughter, Courtney, she was a little cheerleader for the recreation department. So I sat in the bleachers watching her cheer. I had slathered myself with sunscreen, but I got a pretty nasty sunburn anyway. I was extremely miserable. Next day, my grandmother had invited me to her church's homecoming, and I'm like not one to turn down church lady food, so I went. Now, I look like a freaking lobster, but like I said, I went. Now, after lunch, her preacher was talking to me about my lobster-like appearance, and he said that he knew of something that could help the burn and pain from it go away. Well, now I was thinking he was going to suggest something like aloe or a solar cane, but no, he said that he knew how to talk the fire out of burns. Well, it shocked me because he's a preacher, and a lot of people see that gift as the devil's work. Since then, I found out that some call it faith healing. But anyway, he did his little thing, and within a day or two, I was back to my normally pale skin, and the pain was pretty much gone too. So what is this gift? Now, this particular gift isn't something you hear talked about a whole lot because, like I said, some see it as the devil's work. But whether you call it mountain medicine, and I'm going to get to that part of it in a minute, the devil's work or faith healing is a healing practice that's been handed down for many generations. And it's something that is more common here in the South. Now, the biggest rule, and I hate to call it a rule, but the biggest rule about it is that the healer and the patient have to believe and have that faith that it's going to work. And in my experience, it does work. Now, there's different methods of doing it too. In one method, the healer passes their hand over the burn while blowing on it in a direction away from the patient's body. While the healer is doing those two things, they recite a prayer 3 times. Now, one method comes from Ireland, and in that one, the healer makes the sign of the cross and then says a few prayers after it. One thing to note about the Irish method is that the healer is not to accept any form of payment or for performing that. And I have found through more research that, most of these people that do these healing practices don't want any kind of payment. Now, up in the mountains of North Carolina, there are 2 tribes of Native Americans that use the practice. And that's what I was getting at about mountain medicine earlier. Now, the Kohari and the Lumbee tribes call the healer a fire blower, and they combine their cultural beliefs and Christianity in that faith healing practice. And it is said they can heal somebody afflicted with whooping cough and make warts go away too. Now, I put a post on Facebook asking my friends and in some of the groups that I'm in for their experiences with old-time medicine and that type of thing. Now, a good friend of mine was practically the only one that responded before I was ready to record anyway. But she said, when I was little and got sick, my grandma would make something nasty that smelled really bad and put it on my chest. I just remember it had mustard seeds in it. I still remember it looked like baby poop. So I got curious about that, and so I went to Google, and I found one thing is like a mustard plaster remedy, and it consists of mustard seed powder paste. And the paste is wrapped in fabric and applied to the skin, and it's usually placed on the chest. Now, that friend of mine, she said that it really worked, but it was really nasty. And that was the thing that stuck out for her about it. And she also said that her grandma could talk warts off. Now, there are tons of types of folk medicines too, and the type used varies from culture to culture. Now, herbs play a big part in folk medicine around the world. A couple of years ago, I took a course on herbal remedies. I was amazed at what I learned from the course, because there's a lot of stuff that grows in our yards that we think are weeds. They're actually herbs that can be used in everyday cures. Now, I'm not saying that to say go out in your yard and dig up a plant unless you really know what you're doing and which part of the plants to use, because, some plants, like parts of it may be toxic while the rest of it is okay, to use for humans. So you really need to know what you're doing with it. Now, it sounds weird, but when I was a teenager, I got really into a movie called The African Queen. And it has Humphrey Bogart and Katharine Hepburn in it. But long story short, Bogart plays the part of a captain of a small boat that delivers supplies to Hepburn, who's a missionary in East Africa. Well, when a war breaks out, sorry, y'all, allergies are still getting me. But when a war breaks out, she decides to leave where she was at with Bogart. And at one point, their little boat gets stuck in like this murky, yucky water. And he has to get out and try to push the water through all that muck. Well, while he's down in the water, he gets covered with leeches. And I have to say that looked pretty disgusting to me. And while that scene was going on and I was grossing out over it, my mom started telling me about how leeches were used in bloodletting a long time ago. Now, remember, I was a teenager, so that was like, I had not heard of a lot of these things. Well, when I started looking in today's episode, leeches came up, and guess what? They're still used today. Now, how this remedy came about is pretty fascinating. Hippocrates, who was an ancient Greek doctor, believed that if there was an imbalance in the four bodily humors, and I'm not talking about ha-ha humor, but it was like the blood, black bile, yellow bile, and phlegm, it would cause disease. And the way to remedy that was to drain the excess. And most of the time of that excess was actually blood. Well, by the 1830s in Europe, bloodletting was a big thing. And the use of leeches became very common. Now, leeches were being used to treat all kinds of ailments. So for a while, it was like a big industry just importing leeches into some European countries. Well, for a while after that, the practice kind of died out because there was like no medical evidence that said it helped really anything. But recently, leeches started making a comeback because of advances in surgery. Hospitals in London use them to drain excess blood after microsurgery, and in turn, it promotes healthy healing. They're also used after skin grafts and like when fingers or ears have to be reattached, like if, they've been severed after, during an accident. So what is it about the little bloodsuckers that make them useful on the medical scene? I thought that was just still kind of weird, but leeches are known to produce a protein that stops blood from clotting. And by stopping clotting, it gives the little tiny veins time to heal themselves. How cool is that? Now, I'm not so sure that I love the idea of having leeches attached to me, but I guess if it came down to like a life or death situation, I'd just have to get over that ickiness. Now, closer to home, the Appalachian folks have deep roots in folk medicine, and they go way back for generations. It started because people had to use what they had on hand to tend to the sick people and comfort the dying and even aid in childbirth. And the funny thing is, even though no harm was being done to anyone, the women who practiced folk medicine were often ostracized by like people in the bigger cities. You would think that there was something evil to it. A lot of those people were using like prayer and Bible verses in their healing, and people would still say they were doing the devil's work. And there are others who don't even tie their healing practice to any religion at all. Like I said, folks had to use what they had on hand. There's nothing evil or religious about using like elderberries that's been harvested from your yard to help a friend fight the common cold, or like brewing a pot of catnip tea to help cure the croup. Now, another thing you have to understand about the Appalachian folks is they relied so heavily on folk medicine because of economic reasons. The folks in that area were not wealthy by any means. Now, if a city doctor was to come way out to where they were to check on a sick person, he would charge a fee, and most of the time that fee was like way more than they could afford. Those that practice folk medicine may not have had a fancy college degree, but their skills were crucial for their communities. And if they accepted payment for their services, it would be more like of a trade, like the barter system. Now, I do just want to tell y'all that I'm not recommending that anything that I've told y'all so far should be used, to try to cure yourself or your friends and family. Most of the time this stuff is done by people who have gained a lot of experience in it. And I'm not anybody to be telling any medical advice, okay? Now, another perspective is that what we consider modern medicine today will one day in the future be called folk medicine, because it will be remedies that are handed down to the next generation. And it comes down to the fact that science is subject to fashion and fads, meaning that when the times change, so did science and medical practices. Nothing really ever stays the same, but there is one thing about it. The original folk medicine from the people of the days that are now history will stay in practice for years to come. Now, before we wrap things up today, and y'all probably hoping I will because I'm just not able to speak today. But anyway, I just want to tell y'all about this experience I had Sunday morning. Y'all, I can't make up the stuff that happens to me sometimes. So I was in Walmart. I was looking at their clearance Halloween stuff when I noticed this lady was staring at me. Now, I thought maybe she recognized me from the podcast or she's a Facebook friend that I just wasn't recognizing. But I went on to the next aisle to keep looking for, the marked down Halloween stuff. And she shows up there and she continues to stare. I was getting a little uncomfortable and I was thinking, what is this lady's problem? Well, I finished up my shopping and I made my way to the checkout, and lo and behold, the lady is standing there. When she realizes I'm behind her, she starts staring again. So I started playing with my phone. I was getting really uncomfortable. And I was trying to distract myself from realizing that she was staring at me again. Well, finally she spoke. And she said, "I want to apologize for staring at you. You look just like my daughter who passed away." Well, as you can imagine, my heart was just breaking. I could feel it, So I offered my condolences, but she went on to say, "Thank you. I have a favor to ask. I know it's weird, and I'll understand if you don't want to, but can you give me a hug and say bye, Mama, to me?" So at that point, my anxiety just started going into overdrive. But I thought, hey, if it makes this lady feel better, I can oblige this one little thing. So I did it. The lady smiles, she thanks me, and then she leaves. Well, the cashier rang up my stuff, and the total came to $100.87. But I knew that wasn't right. Something wasn't right because my stuff was on clearance. And as I was, loading up my buggy with stuff, I was keeping this running estimate of what I could expect to pay, Now, the cashier told me when I questioned her about it, she's like, "Your total includes your, what your mom bought." And I'm like, "What?" And she says, "Your mom said you were paying for her items along with your things." I informed the cashier that lady was not my mom. Then the cashier says, "Well, I saw you hug her and I heard you call her Mama." Y'all, my soul left my body, and this chubby mama ran out of that store so fast, I was looking for that wretched woman. I ain't even lying. I spotted her loading up her car, and as I make my way to her, she sees me coming. So she decided to jump in her car. Well, when I made it to her, she was like, how you had to pull that last leg in. And so I grabbed onto her leg, okay, and I started pulling it. Well, y'all, I pulled it so hard, it came right off. Holy peg leg Batman. The lady is a pirate. Well, I didn't let that stop me, so I grabbed her other leg and started pulling it, just like I'm pulling your leg right now. Did I fool you? Hopefully you got a little laugh. Well, y'all, that's it for today's Mystery, Murder, and Magic. Be sure to come back on Wednesday for the midweek mini. Be blessed, y'all.